Another fortnight, another news roundup.
You feel like you're walking out to Wembley?
Absolutely.
From the tunnel.
Cristiano Ronaldo.
Welcome everyone. Do the Queen's wave.
We should have had like little mascots.
Although, bichara Cristiano Ronaldo, he's going to be sat on the bench most of the time now, isn't he?
Why's that?
Nah, it'll be alright.
Because of Big Ralph.
Nah, it'll be alright.
Do you think?
So what'd you have for breakfast, Ibrahim?
Nothing.
Nothing. Ooh. No one.
Nothing.
Me neither. Guess we're just
We're running
hard
on
workers.
empty.
Just
Yeah.
get straight to it.
Running on empty.
News Roundup, episode 11.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh everyone, and it's another fortnight, which means it's another news roundup, and with me today are the two gurus themselves. We've got Ibrahim Khan to my right here, who's one of the co-founders of IFG, and we've got Mohsin Patel, who's the other co-founder, and we're going to be discussing some very exciting topics. So let's dive straight into it. Oh, but before we do that, stick around until the end and you're going to find out how Ibrahim and Mohsin met. How did this love affair really begin? It's not literally a love affair, but kind of sorts.
You're making it worse.
I know, yeah. Just digging. Stop digging. Stop digging.
Right, so biggest news story of the day, something that nobody can stop talking about, is Omicron. Now, I know that sounds like something out of Terminator, but it's not. It's the new variant of COVID. Unfortunately, we've got a new variant of COVID that's been discovered in South Africa, though its origin is unknown. And how it works is essentially this variant has a mutated spike gene. So the spike gene is that pointy bit in the little spikes that come off that circular COVID virus model that we all seen.
Is that the technical term? That pointy bit?
Yeah, you know me with my biological terms, I know it all. But so the way vaccines work is that it trains your body to identify these spike proteins and essentially be able to, your body is able to detect the virus much faster because it recognizes the spike proteins and therefore it's able to repel it. But now that this variant has different spike proteins, it essentially means that your body may not recognize it as fast. So that leaves a lot of questions open regarding vaccine effectiveness and whether this will be like the Delta wave. So a lot of concerns around that. Boris Johnson has come out yesterday saying don't cancel your Christmas parties. So the IFG Christmas party is still on.
You got your Christmas jumper on?
Yeah, Christmas mood, although my mum claims it's not a Christmas jumper. So I'll let you guys in the comments decide whether this is a Christmas jumper or not.
We think it is.
A sales fact, if you go to the supermarkets after Christmas, you can get a lot of Christmas jumpers for very cheap.
I wonder why.
Ditto chocolate after Easter.
Yeah.
And Valentine's Day.
Oh, yeah.
And Christmas trees after Christmas.
I mean, that makes sense.
Yeah, true. Not really a tip there.
All the Muslims got Christmas trees up in January. Like, look, it was a sale. I've got 5 of them now.
Getting ready for Ramadan. So back to the story. So there may be a possible lockdown that may happen early next year, although Boris Johnson has said that don't cancel your Christmas plans. Everything should go as planned. But he is doing a rollout of booster shots that will be available to millions of adults across the country. Now, I was wondering, with COVID variations and mutations happening so consistently, is this what the future looks like? Constant mask wearing, constant fear, and an ever-burdened NHS struggling. What do you guys think?
So as I've understood it, having kind of just read some of the commentary around this stuff, I think the mutation it can be a good thing, right? Because when a virus mutates, it apparently weakens. And I think what they're saying, the data is saying anyway, that certainly in South Africa, there's not been any severe hospitalizations from this variant. And I don't think it's a question right now of like, this is, Ebola-like. It's a question of just the spread, right? So, do we get to a place where this thing mutates so much that it eventually just becomes a pointless disease.
Fair, like the flu, could become something very minor. True. What do you think, Ibrahim?
I don't know what to think because I'm not a biologist, but my instinct suggests that we need to take precautions, but we need to carry on with our lives, because at this point I think it's becoming a material dent as a percentage of our overall lives. So if a person lives, the average person lives across the world, perhaps it's higher in the UK, but 60, right? Let's say, and that's and COVID has already been around at least 2 years or so, and it's probably going to be around for 4, 5, 6 years. That's now a 12th or a 10th of a person's lifetime. So that's 10% of someone's life. So I think that when we get into that kind of territory, it doesn't make sense to be on like high alert, high lockdown, especially when it's affecting billions of people, and inevitably you can't control billions of people. So I think, and it pains me to say this, I think Boris is right at this point.
Wow. You heard it here first, folks. Ibrahim thinks Boris Johnson is right.
But kids as well, right? So think about, you're talking about adult lives. What about kids' lives? Like, I've got a 6-year-old and a 5-year-old at home who for like half their lives have known, COVID, lockdown, remote learning, this, that, and the other. And I remember, like, during lockdown, I was trying to explain to them that this isn't what life is like, by the way. Like, this is the first time it's happened in my life. And, trying to get that concept across. It's actually mad when you think about it.
It's really crazy thinking about just, the fact that masajid were closed throughout Ramadan, that Hajj didn't happen. All of this, that in Ramadan, people couldn't go to the masjid. And I remember, like, all the elders at our mosque were so emotional because it was the first time in their 60, 70 years of life where they could not enter the masjid, like where it was physically closed. So I think now that 2 years have passed and people have kind of got used to it, it doesn't seem as so much of a strange thing, but really it is like a very different era we're now living in. But I do agree with Ibrahim. I do think that it is a manner of just carrying on, because you can't live in fear forever, right? True. Right, on to our next exciting story. Now, there's a great concept that has been talked about across the TikTok and social media world, and I understand it not even a little bit. So, Mohsen, why don't you explain this next thing for us?
You're passing it on to someone who also doesn't understand.
Great. That's why you guys come to us, right?
No, but I mean, so the idea is Web3, right? And we've heard a lot of people talk about Web3, and there's two sides to this debate. One side of the debate is Web3 it's all a load of garbage. It's just another buzzword. We've had lots of buzzwords before. All of this stuff, blockchain, crypto, etc., that underlies Web3, it's all, a solution in search of a problem. This isn't a real thing. On the other hand, you have the very pro Web3 people, and very smart people in this camp too, and smart people in the other camp as well, that say, no, this is what the future is what it looks like. So let's kind of just break it down a bit. So what is Web3? The way I've heard it described, which I think is quite neat, is you had web, like Web 1, very early web, which is what you can describe as read only. You have Web 2, which is read and write, and you have Web 3, which is read, write, and own. So Web 1, read only, is basically taking your bricks and mortar stores online, or a magazine, and you put it online, or that kind of thing. Web 2 is where we are now, where we're reading and writing, i.e. we are interacting. So, social media, this kind of thing, YouTube, all that stuff would be Web 2. And Web 3 is where all of the things that are happening in Web 2, because they're happening through centralized companies like YouTube and Facebook and Google, who own lots and lots of data, Web 3 is where projects start happening on the web that are actually owned by the people and for the people. And the way that these things evolve and develop is individuals are making contributions, and that's their part to the web. There's a chap called Gavin Wood, who's apparently the father of this term, Web3, and he coined it as wanting, what was it? Less trust, less trust, more truth. I.e., at the moment we trust people like Google and Facebook and whatever, but that's more like blind faith to some extent.
Yeah.
I've got a great idea. Why don't we today claim Web 4?
We coined
Like
it.
you just literally called out some random dude. All he's done is put a number before web after web. So that Web 4 is where you can read and write and own and eat the web.
Smell it.
It could actually happen, That's not a bizarre thought.
Yeah,
Like the
physically
sensory,
being it.
the sensory interaction.
I think
with,
smell's more likely though, isn't it?
Oh, I don't know.
Like through the speakers, a mist comes out.
Fine. Okay. Well, anyway, I've made the claim. So
Maybe that's Web 5.
Maybe in 20 years from now, someone's going to be like, Ibrahim Khan first coined Web 4 on the news roundup.
Yeah.
Fair. I think it's interesting. I don't know. I just don't feel I feel it's more an evolution rather than a revolution, because you could technically own a lot of content while it's on social media, for example, like whatever you post on YouTube or whatever you create in terms of a website, that's your content that you technically own. But that's still categorized in Web 2. So I feel like these are just kind of like fences that have been put up, but they're very arbitrary at this point.
Yeah, look, there's no doubt that from like a legal standpoint, the intellectual property of something that you upload is yours. Obviously, there's a bunch of caveats that YouTube will make you sign before you upload it. But I think that sometimes we are limited by how we think about the world, right? So if you think about the way the web is right now, nobody could have predicted that it would have been like that 15 years ago, for example. It's very, very hard. Like, these things are rarely revolutions. They're not like overnight things. They like slowly happen, and then kind of people realize it without necessarily coming to like a light bulb or light switch moment. So I'm more in this camp. I do think that this stuff will revolutionize. I think that this idea that individual contributors to a project that is decentralized is going to be a thing. Like, there's no doubt. So one other way of putting it, and I was reading an interview from this guy Gavin Wood, and he was saying that, look, when you chat on something like let's say WhatsApp, say it's encrypted. We have blind faith in Facebook, who are the owners of WhatsApp, to that this is encrypted. And he describes it as, well, okay, but what if they've got a key to like decrypt it? Yeah. Like, we don't know that. None of this is open source. They don't publish their code. But if you've got an open source project that's for the people, by the people, contributed to by everybody, and everything is there for everyone to see, then he describes it as, it's akin to me and you going in a forest and talking, i.e. that something's happening in a public setting, but you can be very, very confident in its privacy.
Fair point. What do you think about all this, Ibrahim?
on MetaMask, which is this app that you can hold cryptocurrencies through, there's a section called Web 3, I think it is. Is that literally just them naming their secure browser?
No, I don't think so. I've not actually seen it. My sense, though, is what it would be is probably people building things that are kind of fit for this Web 3. So one way to think about this, right, is as I said before, companies are holding data. So your Googles and your Facebooks, and the way that this has evolved is, as humans, we've gone from like, small village kind of societies where, we trust Khizr the butcher because like he gives, really good meat, for example. Like, we know that he catches it
from
fresh.
donkeys.
Horse meat, remember that scandal?
Secretly horse meat.
So, we really trust Khizr. And so we'll always go to Khizr for our meat. Like, we do that all the time. That's a very kind of centralized world. We ported that over to the web. So you've got big companies that we trust, and then you've got like, regulators that we trust to kind of, survey all of these people as well. Mm-hmm. But regulators are inefficient. They're government funded usually. That can mean gaps in terms of funding. They're usually overwhelmed, and the old kind of saying, who watches the watchman. So all of this stuff is happening through centralized layers because we've always done it that way. We've never really seen it any other way. But if you've got a world where your data is stored across lots of different things, so it's actually private. So even if I hack this person and all of their data, which wouldn't happen because of cryptography and everything's hashed.
Mm-hmm.
But even if it did, I don't have your complete picture. Everything is kind of across different nodes, as it were.
Very interesting. Well, we'll just have to wait and see how this goes. So for our final story for today, Ibrahim, what's coming at us?
Our man Jack Dorsey, the CEO of Twitter and Square, has stepped down from Twitter, and he's handed over his reins to a man called Parag Agrawal, who is from Indian background, as the name probably suggests. I thought this was fascinating for a couple of reasons. One, I find it fascinating that someone like Jack Dorsey and Elon Musk and possibly others run large publicly listed companies, and not just one of them but two of them, and I'm fascinated by that, and I don't know if that's something that's sustainable long term. I suspect that with Jack Dorsey it shows that it probably isn't. As business people, I struggle to kind of fathom how Jack did it. So I'd love to talk a little bit about that, and then I think the other really interesting theme here is how many Indians are in charge of big tech at the moment. So we're talking Microsoft, we're talking Google, we're talking, I think, Ubisoft, Twitter, and then there was a number of others, Oracle. There was so many of them that are now run by Indian origin, non-Muslim, but Hindu origin, Indian tech experts.
IBM as well.
IBM as well. And that got me thinking about why is that, like not necessarily in a bad way, but why is that? Is it because, and I had some initial thoughts, which is that Indians are well into tech and do well, and then once you get in, I think the network effect kicks in as well, and they kind of look after each other. Indians have a really sound base in IIIT, which is a big institute.
IIIT.
Yeah.
It's like Web3, but for IT.
Yeah. But for Indians. So, they've got that really strong academic pedigree. And then there might be something around, how America wants to ally up with India as a counterpoint against China in the future. And having strong ties allows them to do that. Like there's a lot of Israeli CEOs or leadership people in the US ecosystem. So it's almost like an axis of Israel, USA, and India. That I might just be these are just my kind of really high level observations, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
I think it's very interesting. I do think there is that political sense, but I strongly do identify with the idea that it is due to the rigorous process that many Indians go through when they go into tech fields. So the education system, especially the top tech universities, they have a very rigorous application process, and it's hugely competitive. So naturally, that environment will allow the creme de la creme, as they say, to really excel. And I feel like that level of competency might not be tested as much the same elsewhere in the world. So I know with this new CEO of Twitter, for example, he was, I think, top of his class in one of the top institutions for tech. And then when he came over, I think he did a PhD in Harvard, Stanford, and that was also in computer science. So naturally, you could see that he was very academically brilliant, and naturally, someone like that in going into the business world will excel quite well if he has good business acumen as well.
I'm not sure though.
Really?
Like a bright mind maketh not business leader.
True.
So like,
I think it really helps though.
sure. Like, I think that my thoughts are a few things. Like, number one, it's fascinating that, or at least I find it fascinating that, if you think about the archetypal business leader, even 30 years ago, as recent as 30 years ago, it was not, a nerdy software engineer.
From India.
Full stop, right? But now you look at the companies you reeled off, who basically running the world one way or another.
Run the show, yeah.
It's all full of either Indian software engineers or at large, just software engineers, people who built something themselves with their hands, but crucially they graduated with the company. They didn't then kind of build it and say, oh, this kind of business thing isn't for me, I'm just going to keep building in the background. And I think the strength of these companies is very, very closely correlated with the fact that you've got software engineers in leadership positions, meaning that they were the ones that kind of built this from scratch and they understand it intimately, and they've then kind of gone on to lead the business in a very big way. Speaking about the India thing in particular, I think that it's interesting. Obviously, from the engineering side, as you said, there's a strong kind of provenance when it comes to Indian tech. But more than that, I think people coming from that region tend to be slightly more entrepreneurial perhaps than other regions. Tend to be willing to put more hard work in, frankly.
Yeah.
Take risks. Start from the bottom.
Yeah. And also I think that, for the types that, I don't know the background of all of these, these CEOs, but I suspect they come from pretty good families.
It's a mixture.
Is it?
There's some really humble ones as well.
Are there? Okay.
I think Sundar Pichai was like quite humble
Right.
background.
Interesting. Because what I was going to...
Relative to where he is now, he's earning hundreds of millions a year.
Yeah, of course, yeah.
100%.
But what I mean is that if you come from like a decent, Indian background, you've got the ability to, head over to the US, which not everybody has. And then I think it's a bit of what you said as well, like the network effects of, one successful Indian CEO means that at the time when, X board is deciding their next CEO, it's not a wild idea to appoint, an Indian CEO.
Completely agree. All right, go on, Ibrahim. Mohsin, tell us how this love affair began.
It was a moonlit night in...
isn't every night moonlit?
That's true, yeah.
Well, there's some nights where there's no moon, right?
2011, and I was attending an ISOC barbecue at St Catherine College, Oxford, next to the cricket field, and that's where I spotted a young man. He didn't have a beard at the time. He had a shocking head of hair.
I was a waiter serving chicken legs. No.
I know. And he was standing under the tree, and the moonlight struck him, and I was like,
Did Bollywood songs go off in your head?
Nasheeds.
yeah. It's more like war music. So yeah, that's how we met. It was at an ISOC barbecue, basically.
Nice, mashallah. Anything to add, Mohsin, that was memorable from that first meeting?
No. Nothing.
Did Ibrahim strike you as your future best friend?
Oddly, yeah. Actually, I think we just hit it off. I think, and it's very rare that happens.
Nice.
So, yeah.
Nice.
What made you trust each other? Is it just the time you spent and the bonding?
We got involved in this really high-profile crime, and then we basically backed each other to the. No, I'm joking. Yeah, I think it's just a time thing. Like you do things together, and that they say, don't you, that you don't know someone until you kind of live with them, travel with them, do business with them, etc. And we've done all of those things and more. So yeah.
MashaAllah, there we go. Here's to a long and fruitful relationship, inshallah. And with that, we conclude today's episode. Jazakallahu khairan to all the viewers joining us today, and inshallah see you in another fortnight for another news roundup. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Assalamu alaikum.